Do you guys get much?
Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Boom, and welcome to the Big Honker Podcast, brought to you by Goose Creek Retrievers. I am Jeff Stanfield with Matt Peel and Andy Shaver.
Matt Peel's the guy here. You're just like, where are you going now? You said you're leaving here again.
Yeah, I'm rolling out, headed to Ohio. I got some master dogs and a test up there, so we're going to run in Ohio. Come back. Go back to Ohio the next week, and then I'll be in Mexico, New York after that.
Goodness. You're on like a rock star type world tour of America. You're all over the place.
I'm not a fan. I'm not a stoner. I'm not a if I could bring Stoner with me and have him drive me everywhere, I'd be good.
Are you gonna?
I'm not a driver.
Do you go to the Dakotas and later in the year in the mountain states, or do you stay on the East Coast?
No, I stay pretty much on the East Coast. I don't. I've always wanted to run out there this is the dumbest reason to want to go do something, but I just want to go out there and have a ribbon picture with the mountains in the background, just because like out here it's fodder and shit. So like it has nothing to do with the dogs. I just want a ribbon picture with the mountains and shit.
Well, if you'll send me a ribbon picture next time I'm out west, I'll take a picture and you can Photoshop it in.
Perfect.
And then you don't have to travel. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, win-win.
We can do one in front of Mount Rushmore, whatever you want. down the strip in Vegas, whatever. I mean, shit, we can make it look good.
All right, so I know we're on a time crunch here. So when we left off last, I guess it was 3 weeks ago. We've all been busy. We were talking about like just introducing the puppy into basic dog training. Talked about something keep it fun, keep it light. So now we're going to talk about we're starting to ramp up. At what time do we start demanding more of the dog to where it's not all fun, but it's time to start learning some shit?
Formal training usually starts right around 6 months old. And that's when you can kind of get into the meat and potatoes of training. Your collar conditioning, they're a little bit more mature than they are when they're younger. They can handle, as we say, handle pressure a little bit better. And pressure going back to, like, your voice is pressure, your e-collar is pressure, your leash is pressure. Everything that we use to train these dogs is pressure. It's just varying degrees. But at 6 months old, they start to have the mental capacity to be able to process information like that. That's when a lot of guys start like a compulsion program, force fetch. That's kind of when like I said, the meat and potatoes of it really starts.
6 months old. And you said your voice can be pressure?
Everything is pressure that we do with these dogs. Your presence is pressure. So if you're working with your dog casting back to a pile, right, like on the tee, you can use your presence to push the dog back. So if the dog doesn't go, you give them the cast and they don't go, and you take a step forward and closing that distance between you, that's pressure. You're not applying it with the e-collar. Like, so many guys think of like pressure as an e-collar. Everything's, e-collar. A flat buckle collar, you pulling a dog around on that is pressure. It's just varying degrees. So like I said, everything from a regular flat buckle collar with a leash on it, a pinch collar, e-collar, your voice, your physical presence. I do a lot of place training. So if you got a dog that doesn't want to jump up onto the place, they just want to stare at you, and you close the distance between you and them, you're putting pressure on the dog to move away from you to get into that position you want them in. And that's like, I think guys fall short in training in some aspects because they think of pressure just with the e-collar. But it's all pressure related. Everything we do with these dogs in training is in theory pressure related. Confidence building and pressure related.
I've never thought about that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense whenever you explain it that way. So now we've got this 6 month old puppy. They should have sit and all that stuff down by this point, right?
Yeah, by 6 months old, you should have a reasonable level of obedience. And I don't mean that to like, I call it like obediencing the shit out of them. Like, just don't do only obedience. You know what I mean? Because then you have dogs that don't want to go. A buddy of mine just got a dog in training like 2-3 days ago, and he's called me like 3 times about it, talking about how like it won't do anything, and how when the owner dropped it off, he was like, "Look, watch this, sit down, lay down, stay," and like he didn't do anything to build the dog up. He just did everything he could to make the dog, obedient. And then you take the drive out of them when you do that. So young dogs, a reasonable level of obedience. Like, don't be an ass. Come back when I call you. Sit down for a little bit. There's nothing prim and polished and everything like that, but a certain level of obedience, absolutely, and just a ton of drive. Because if you build their drive, then you, through pressure, can train the dog to comply with whatever you're asking it to do. But if you chip away at drive when they're young, you'll never have enough dog to deal with later.
Right. So you got a basic level of obedience, dog sitting there. What drills are we doing with this 6-month-old? Is it all like throwing bumpers forward out front, or are we working in some blinds?
Well, so the way I train, force fetch is kind of like the foundational building block. I mean, after obedience, force fetch is kind of the building block of everything we're going to do after that. Because once you understand pressure to put something in your mouth, it's going to go to the ground to pick it up off the ground, which is going to further and further and further push it out to picking it up from like a pile. And then it goes to the water. And, so that's kind of where I start at 6 months old. That's kind of where we go. I want the dog crazy marking. Like a 6-month-old dog can run some pretty decent marks. Like remote marks, try to get away from just hand thrown bumpers from your hip. If you got a girlfriend, a wife, older kid, a buddy to help you out, get them out in the field, the duck call, having the dog run out to them, and get the dog used to looking out there. Because if everything you do is from the hip, then they're going to think that every retriever that they get is going to come from you. So a decent marking ability, good drive, and reasonable obedience, and then you can jump into, and here's my big disclaimer with force fetch. If you don't know what you're doing, don't do it.
Right.
Find somebody to help you with it. Find somebody, to kind of shadow over you, or, whatever that term is, while you're doing it, help you through the process. Because you can make or break a dog. You can take a mediocre dog and make them pretty damn good, and you can take a really good dog and make them terrible at the same time. If you don't know what you're doing.
On the force fetching table.
Yep, absolutely. And then everything that stems forward from that. But yes, most of your damage is done by guys on the table, and the dog never gets to the ground.
So what level do you think that the trainer needs to be at before they even attempt to force fetch? Like, are there any good references that somebody could like watch or read about?
So there's some videos online. Like, I put out some videos. You've probably seen. And the biggest thing through that, like, those videos, you're not seeing the dog that gives you an issue with it. You know what I mean? Because nobody wants to see that. So if you have the reasonable, middle of the road kind of, not cookie cutter dog, but one that kind of is middle of the road, most guys can get a dog through it if they take their time and are patient and don't get frustrated. That's the biggest thing, is don't get frustrated. But it's like one of the, like, there's some videos, but they're for cookie cutter dogs. Nobody's going to show you like the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. And very rarely, if you do a good job introducing it, very rarely does it get there. But sometimes you have dogs that just fight you to the end on it, which is where I go back to, like, if you don't know what you're doing, don't just decide that, tomorrow after listening to this podcast that you're going to start force fetching your 6-month-old dog.
Right. So
and I will tell this to anybody listening: force fetch has nothing to do with holding a bird in your mouth, in their dog's mouth. I can teach a 14-week-old puppy to do that in about 3 days. That has zero to do. Force fetch is about making a dog think through pressure. That's all it is. Going back to, like, all of our training is pressure related in varying degrees from here on out. Force fetch makes a dog use their brain to think through pressure. If like, guys text me all the time, message me on Instagram, call me, hey, my dog dropped birds. Can you force fetch it? Well, that's not what that's about. You can make it hold, like, sit in the living room and watch TV and put something in its mouth and make it hold it, and you can teach it in 3 or 4 days to just not drop stuff.
That makes sense.
That's the very basic level of, people think force fetch fixes all, and it doesn't. To me, as a trainer, force fetch is about making a dog think through pressure and use their brain in stressful situations.
Right.
That's all it is.
That makes sense. So let's go down that rabbit hole for just a minute, because we'll have to end here pretty quick. The force fetching, fuck, we're gonna have to have like a 2 or 3 part series on that. So the way Ron did it, and Lou was pretty easy to force fetch, but he would put just enough pressure to kind of get a reaction out of Lou, and then the command or whatever.
Everything with training these dogs, the way I look at it, is only enough pressure to generate desired response. And anybody that comes and learns with me, or however, that's what I try to instill in your brain. You only need enough pressure to generate the response. You hear about guys that keep climbing afterwards and whatever. If you got to go up, you got to go up. But if you're getting the response at, let's say, like a 2, why do you need to go to a 10?
Right.
You know what I mean? So you're spot on with that.
Yeah, it was just enough to kind of get what he was looking for, and then get the desired response, like you said, and then it was over. But Lou was pretty. It wasn't as graphic as I was thinking going in. Like, I had this nightmarish situation built up in my mind, and it wasn't that at all.
It's really not.
It wasn't that at all. And I just saw a video of you force fetching a dog on a table, and it was, I don't know, it was a yellow dog.
Yep.
And I mean, that just looked, as peaceful as ever.
If there's a proper introduction, that's how it is. And that video that you're talking about, that's why I posted it, because everything was done right leading up to when we started with the collar, because you don't just slap a collar on him and hope for the best. Right. And on video, in what was that video, 6 minutes?
Yeah.
He was willingly doing it with the collar pressure, because all the building blocks that I was talking about all the way up were done properly.
And so,
but yeah, it's not as you hear horror stories, and every once in a while there's dogs that just it doesn't work out like that. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
But most 99% of your dogs just kind of go through it and get the process, and they're better dogs when they come out of it.
Yeah.
Because their brain's working harder.
So what are the building blocks that you're talking about leading up to this? Like, how do you introduce this properly?
Collar conditioning with obedience, because then the dog understands how to turn off pressure from the collar. Start on the table, and I make the table, like if you go out to my force fetch table right now, there's a pair of toenail clippers and there's a dog brush sitting on it every day, because I'll put you up there and I'll clip your toenails, I'll brush you out, have you looking nice, clean your ears. It's a place where everything can be done that's not pressure related, if you will. So get them used to what they're going to be doing, so they're comfortable sitting up there. Start hold, teaching them that they have to hold it in their mouth properly instead of just like jumping into it and rolling with force fetch, because that's not going to make your dog hold it any better. That's going to make him pick it up. And if you don't do hold conditioning first and you just jump right into force fetch, you'll have a dog that'll snatch a bump out of your hand and then spit it out because he's like, well, I did what you wanted. Right. So it's got to be hold and then fetch and hold. It's kind of a cyclical deal there. But if you make sure that's the biggest thing to do with amateur trainers, and not all amateur trainers, but guys like first dogs and stuff. I see guys all the time that train dogs until they do it right. Right? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me.
So what you're saying is
I train your dog until they don't know how to do it wrong.
Right. They don't know any other way.
And that's the difference. If you train him until he does it right, and then you move on to the next thing, he's not proficient at that. He just did it right once. And then you're going to have to go back to that. But if you train him on that specific thing until he has no idea how to even do it wrong, and then move on, then you have solid dogs.
Yeah. It's like, I think Bruce Lee or something said, you train a lot of guys will train 10,000 kicks one way. I train 10,000 ways to do one kick.
Exactly. And that's, if you train a dog that way, they're solid. And I mean, they're dogs. They'll do dumb stuff from here on out for the rest of their days. But for the most part, they have a good understanding of what you're asking them to do. So that's, the build up to, and I use toe hitch. I don't know what Ron did. Does he use ear? Oh, okay. Well, so same deal. And the cool thing about toe hitch, like I said in that video, it holds the dog accountable. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm pinching your ear and pushing you towards what I want, I'm making the decision for you. If I'm putting pressure on your toes, and again, it's not a lot of pressure. Like, I mean, it's literally like I'm doing it myself right now. It's not a lot, but it's uncomfortable enough that they want to do whatever they can do to escape what's happening. Like, I don't want you to sit here and squeeze on my fingers either. Start there, and then by the time they understand through repetition of doing that, where they're like trying to snatch the bumper from you before you can even touch it, then it's time to go to the collar. But they've already been collar conditioned to learn how to turn off collar pressure. So in 2 or 3 reps of doing it simultaneously, the toe pressure and the collar pressure, they're getting it, and then in a week they're picking it off the ground and forced to a pile.
Right. Okay.
If you do it, if you lay the groundwork properly.
Yeah. All right, my friend. It's been 15 minutes, so force fetching is what's up next. Introduce them properly as the way that you've explained it here. I think next time, we'll talk a little bit more about force fetching next time, because that's a subject that a lot of guys are apprehensive about. It
always is, yeah, man. That'll be a good one. Maybe next time I'll do it out in the kennel and I can run through a dog. If Josh is here, we can he can hold the phone for me or something like that. I'll run through a dog and kind of give a demo on it if you want.
That'll be good.
All right, you have a great week. Try to
be
stay
safe
cool
on the road. You're driving too much. You're driving too much. You worry me.
I'll see you guys.
Bye.
The force fetching, we'll talk more about that next time, because I'd be scared to dive off into it.
That's a hard thing to do if you don't know what you're doing.
But I think after that, that's the hardest thing to do.
I think you're right. I think there's no doubt about it.
So, all right. Bye, everybody.
Peace.
Check out all of our great sponsors. Go check out Goose Creek Retrievers. Message Matt if you have any questions about your dog or what you heard in this episode. Check out Bangtail Whiskey, Pacific Calls, Gundog Outdoors, Dive Bomb Industries, Boss Shot Shells, Dirty Duck Coffee, Looking Glass Duck Club Podcast, Lucky Duck, Eyesight Drone Service, and Stanfield Hunting Outfitters.